Hi, hello, I'm Sam Harris and I read, review and discuss fantasy and science fiction books, and today we're going to be talking Wheel of Time. So, as you guys know, I have been reading The Wheel of Time, one book per month, kind of, for the whole of 2024. I'm currently reading Path of Daggers, which is book 8, and yes, you've heard me right, book 8 in October. Missed a couple of months. I did have a baby this year, so give me some slack, you know? And one of the things that I thought was last month when I got to the halfway point in the Wheel of Time, I had this idea to reach out to my favourite booktubers who have also read the Wheel of Time and ask them why they love it so much, why they recommend it, what their favourite things about the Wheel of Time, why you should read the Wheel of Time if you haven't already. And several of them emailed me to say they didn't have time, and several of them emailed me some video clips, and ironically the person who came last was Matt, my collaborator on the Wheel of Time read along, but I had a really fantastic time watching everyone's clips, and I've collected them all here for you today. So without further ado, let's start watching some clips. Wait, it's gonna be this way? I don't know which way the clip's gonna come from.
Sam, thank you for inviting me to talk about why I love The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan and Brandon Sanderson. This is actually a pretty easy one for me to answer. It is really the ambition of the series that I admire so much. It is the scale also of what is achieved. Scale in terms of the world building that is obvious. This is one of the greatest examples of world building ever achieved in literature, in my opinion. But it is also in terms of the character arcs. You have some vast character arcs in here, taking characters from a simple rustic beginning to an incredibly epic, scaled up ending. It's just really very admirable what Jordan and Sanderson achieved in this series in terms of that. So it's a series that one can get lost in and enjoy, I'm sure, again and again.
Hi, hello, I'm Robin, and I read, review, and discuss only the best fantasy novels. Sorry, couldn't resist. Thank you very much, Sam, for inviting me onto your channel today to talk about why I love The Wheel of Time. So it's been well over a decade since I read that series, and that thing still lives rent-free in my mind. It has some of the most iconic scenes in any fantasy series ever. It's just so epic and grand in scope. It has a special place in my heart because it's the second adult fantasy series that I read following Game of Thrones, and this was back when everyone was getting hyped for the release of A Dance with Dragons. So it got me at an impressionable time, and I was just completely and utterly hooked by this just rich, riveting world. And I mean, like I said, it just has some of the most iconic scenes in all of fantasy that I could think of. Right from the prologue of The Eye of the World, where a guy I won't get into spoilers, but right from the prologue of Eye of the World to the ending of Lords of Chaos, it's just absolutely incredible. It's not a series I think I could honestly recommend to anyone and everyone. But if you're a fantasy reader and you're not scared of taking on those big, massive series, this is definitely one to try. And yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about The Wheel of Time and why I love it. Once again, thank you very much for having me on.
Hello, Sam. Thanks for having me on channel here. A little clip show. One of the best parts of The Wheel of Time for me is by and far the world. The world is so expansive and fully fleshed out and realized that it makes it come alive. That even to this day, years after I finished reading it, it still lives on. And a close second to its amazing, expansive world are the characters. The characters, because you spend so much time with them, you get to become closely intimate with how they work. And instead of a more standard compressed series where you feel that a character has an arc, you know, they have a problem, they learn a lesson, and look at that, they're new, they're enlightened again. Wheel of Time has some seriously flawed characters that have to be taught the lesson over and over again. And ultimately, many of them don't even learn the lesson by the end of it. And so, all of these factors together, an amazing world with intriguing characters, all along with an exciting plot that I won't spoil it. You're only halfway there, so I can't give you too many specifics, but the world, characters, and many of the scenes still live on to me to this day. And I hope everyone gets around the chance to reading it.
Hi, I'm Matt from Bask in the Story, and I am about halfway through buddy reading The Wheel of Time with Sam. So what do I love about it? It is truly epic. The scope, the stakes, the world building, the sheer number of characters and plot lines are all on an absolutely epic scale. But what keeps me avidly reading is the intrigue and desperately wanting to know what happens next, wanting to know more about the world and the people and places within it and their history. Every time I finish a book, I want to pick up the next one as soon as possible, as there are always questions to be answered, and I love how it keeps me engaged as I disappear into the world that Robert Jordan has created.
What is up, you guys? I am Daniel from Digger Dan Reads, and I just want to have a huge shout out to Sam. Thank you, Sam, for letting me be a part of this video. And thank you so much for being so patient with me about finally getting this clip in. Yeah, with Wheel of Time, it is bar none my favorite fantasy series of all time. And whenever I think of Wheel of Time, there's three things that I think of and three things that I absolutely love and adore about this series. One, of course, is the length, right? There's 14 full-length novels and then one novella size, whatever. A lot of people get scared by it, but honestly, with every book, I loved the series more and more, and I was afraid when I was getting towards the end of it ending and not having any more to read, right? Because Robert Jordan, unfortunately, is not with us anymore. So yeah, that's one thing that I love, is actually the length, which I know scares some people. And the other two are maybe more practical or maybe more repeated more, and that is the amazing world building that Robert Jordan has woven into this fantastical series. Without spoiling anything, just as a for instance, like the whole magic system, where there's basically man's magic and women's magic, and they don't really intermingle, but when they do, amazing things happen. Just magic system is amazing, and as you can see to my your left, my right, I got the map. It's kind of a boring map compared to some others, but it's my favorite map. I would say for me personally, it's even over Middle Earth with Tolkien's map. And the reason is because every region, every country on this map, Jordan has made it feel distinctive in like just little different things. So that's amazing. And the last thing, and maybe the most important for a lot of people, is amazing characters. I know early on in the first couple books, some characters like Matt don't really shine, and it takes a lot for people to be invested in with him. By the end of the series, he's a lot of people's favorites. And that's just because Robert Jordan is fantastic at giving a lot of character moments, giving different characters or moments to shine. I forget the number, but I think there's like 200 some plus characters that are named. I don't even know how many POV characters there are. So there's a lot of people you got to keep track of in your head. And if you don't, it's okay. They'll pop back and be like, oh yeah, I remember you. Like, so just a lot of amazing characters. And with that, like I said, with that 15 book page time, there's a lot of space to love people. So those are the reasons why I love Wheel of Time.
If you're looking for a really long fantasy series to just get totally absorbed in, a series where you can follow one core group of characters over the course of innumerable books and get to know them really well and get invested in their lives and their stories, and ultimately just a series that you can devote a lot of attention to and totally fall in love with, I think you can hardly go better than The Wheel of Time. The series is very slow and meandering, and a lot of people see that as a weakness. I think it can be at times, but I think that's also one of the core features that drew me in. It's a world that you can get totally invested in, and it's just rich in detail. Robert Jordan just goes on and on describing the minutiae of daily life in this world, from the clothes to the food to all elements of the cultures in this world. And you get so wrapped up in this that when a big climactic scene is happening, when a character suddenly decides to take a decisive action, you get totally blindsided. You're like, oh, we're doing this now? We're doing this? Okay. It's a rich, well-written, thoroughly enjoyable series that is an exploration of all aspects of life, really, punctuated by huge moments of epic grandeur. And the slowness of the series is really what makes the catharsis at the end even more cathartic. I've never experienced a catharsis like that reading any other book series, and a large part of the reason for that is just the series is long. It's a super fun series with a great fan community that has been built up around it, and overall it's just a great thing to get into if you want to escape reality for a little bit. Or a long bit.
And I think it's probably time for me to talk about why I love The Wheel of Time. And hello, Barry. Perfect timing, young man, perfect. Well, I say young man, he's a senior cat now, so he's kind of an old man. Why do I love The Wheel of Time? The big thing for me is going to be the thing that it's going to be for a lot of people, which is the world. I think that the world of The Wheel of Time is one of the most real feeling fantasy worlds that I've ever been kind of involved and interested in. Every single element feels like it connects. Jordan is just seeding the story with all of these incredible things that, you know, like we get something that's seeded in book 1 that is paid off in like book 5, book 6, book 7. We have these incredibly well-written characters that Jordan kind of gives you this archetype as we start the series, and then he just slowly builds and builds and builds on them. So you have characters like Perrin, who is this big, strong guy who is afraid to kind of be big and strong, you know? He doesn't like, he has always had to be careful or else he would hurt people. He would always have to be quiet or else he would scare people. He was never forceful because his physical presence was something he was so conscious of. And you have characters like Matt, who he has such an incredibly low opinion of himself. He, you know, thinks of himself as someone who runs at the first sign of trouble. He thinks of himself as someone who is unreliable. And then the evolution of that character, where you see the difference between how he feels about himself and who he really is. And I think that you get some fantastic stuff with Matt. Things like when he's like, oh, only an idiot would go in there and try and save those women. And then the other character's like, what are you doing? He's like, well, obviously I'm going in to save those women. And you have characters like Moraine, who is almost this kind of, almost like a cookie cutter of this kind of like suspicious, mystical, mysterious character. And you just slowly build out into what we get of her later in the series. You get characters like Nynaeve, who are very loud and brash, but internally very conflicted and very shy in some ways. Characters like Egwene, who is just incredibly powerful, but feels so powerless in many of the situations she's involved in, especially in book 2. The conflicts of the characters, the incredible nature of the world building, there is just so much going on in the Wheel of Time, and so much that I absolutely love. If you haven't decided to read the Wheel of Time already, after you've seen all of these incredible people tell you how good this series is, then I don't know how I can tell you. Apart from the fact to tell you that I thought that this series was going to be boring. I thought it was going to be stuffy. I thought it was going to be slow. And I don't like books that are like that. There are a few books that are a little bit slower that I've really enjoyed in terms of the pacing. But Wheel of Time, sometimes there will be a chapter that is just like a debate in a forest between a few characters who are at odds, and it's like the most thrilling chapter I've ever read. I just have so much admiration for this series, so much love for it. I can absolutely see why it's such a cornerstone of fantasy literature, and I think one of the reasons that I wanted to read it, and one of the things that I kind of built the channel on, was that I was actually quite new to reading adult fantasy. So I had read a few fantasy books growing up and loved them, and then took about a 15-year break from reading. And then when I came back to reading again with Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere, I felt like the Cosmere was a fantastic gateway drug for fantasy, and it helped me see what fantasy has grown and has changed into in the modern era. But it also gave me that interest to look back and to see kind of where modern fantasy came from. And honestly, it feels to me like the Wheel of Time is like the prototypical archetypal fantasy series. Yes, it is very long. Yes, I'm only halfway through, but I feel like the Wheel of Time is giving me the foundation that I need to understand and enjoy every series released since. I am reading Wheel of Time and going, oh wow, this reminds me of this storyline in the Cosmere, or this reminds me of this character in the Greenbone saga, or this reminds me of, you know, these people, this race in Wheel of Time remind me of the characters in John Gwyn's Bloodsworn saga. And I feel like every modern author has taken a little bit of inspiration from Wheel of Time. You do have some authors who've taken more than others. So if you read Of Blood and Fire by Ryan Carhill, you'll see that he's heavily inspired by the first few books in the Wheel of Time. But the one thing that I would say to that is that obviously Jordan was heavily inspired by Lord of the Rings, and he was told by his publisher, you know, write something that's a bit Lord of the Ringsy, and we'll get it out. And that's what he did. And then as soon as book one is over, he drops that Lord of the Rings stuff and just writes his own books. And all of the books so far have been above 4 stars for me. And I'm currently reading Path of Daggers, which is one of the first books that people seem to universally agree is part of the slog. And I'm loving it. I'm like 75% of the way through, and I'm just having a fantastic time. And I'm really looking forward to reading more of this series. And I've been reading one a month, or trying to read one a month, and I'm actually going to try and read 2 this month in October, because I'm just having so much fun with book 8, and I would like to get a bit more back on track. So, all in all, if I haven't convinced you to read this series, and if my friends haven't convinced you to read this series, then I don't know what more I can say. But what I can say is, if you like this video, please give it a like. If you would like to talk about the Wheel of Time, please don't talk about anything past book 7, because I haven't got that far yet. I mean, I'm in book 8, but you don't know where I'm in book 8. And even if people who are watching the video may have finished it, I see every single comment when it comes in, and I really don't want to be spoiled on this amazing series. I have actually accidentally spoiled myself on a couple of things already by looking at the wiki with a bit too casual of an abandon, so please don't comment anything after book 7. Crown of Swords, that's the moratorium, anything after that, and nothing on New Spring because I haven't read that yet. Also, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, I've got a ton of Wheel of Time videos. I've posted a non-spoiler review and a full hour-long spoiler discussion for every single book. And I'm going to continue to do that until the series is done, and should be finishing early next year. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll speak to you tomorrow. Thanks so much to all the collaborators on this one. Very much appreciated.